Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Fuqua LinkedIn Live series. My name is Aaron Kay. I'm a faculty member here at Fuqua in our organization management division. I'm trained as a social psychologist, and I study the social psychology of things relevant to the workplace. I'm just going to quickly throw some slides up on the screen here for you. Just give me 1 second. Okay, hopefully you can see these slides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over a quick presentation with you and then take some questions or whatever, or just have a discussion afterwards. Now, I really want to thank you again for coming and engaging with this. What I want to present to you is a new area of research that I've embarked on over the last couple of years. Since my PhD, I've always been interested in issues of diversity and inclusion and inequality as they manifest in society and in organizations. And more recently, I've been trying to broaden that study, broaden that topic to understand a different group, which is military veterans. And I've tried to apply a new methodology that I'll talk about a little bit to understand issues surrounding the hiring and retention of veterans. So the problem that I'm engaging in, here's some new data I want to share with you. This is looking at how much money basically veterans are making as a function of their cohort compared to matched non-veterans by age. What you can see here that's interesting in the top left panel here, World War II vets actually out-earned their non-veteran cohort throughout life if you compare them. Korea vets also tended to until older age. When you look at Vietnam, you start seeing it flipping, and it starts becoming the case that actually after about 35 years old or 40 years old, non-veterans are out-earning veterans. And here in the bottom right panel, we have the all-volunteer force. So from 1973 or so forward, when the military went to all-volunteer, now we're starting to see a very large trend in which non-veterans are earning more money than veterans. And so if you look at that gap on the bottom right panel, the question is, why is this? And more generally, the question is, why are veterans what we call underemployed? Different types of metrics, although veterans get jobs, there's no question. Different metrics show that given their training, given their age, et cetera, they don't tend to get promoted as quickly. They don't tend to make as much money. They don't get employed as large a variety of careers as non-veterans. And what I'm going to talk to you today about is the sort of new attempt I've been working on to answer this question. So I've really been addressing this through a couple of different ways. And what I've done is I've actually started this thing called the Veteran Transitions Research Initiative here at Duke, which has the goal of doing two things. First, has the goal of us leading and doing basic social science research, that is like psychological, social psychological, sociological, and so forth, behavioral research, into understanding issues of why people might not be hiring or veterans might not be succeeding at the workforce. And so we're trying to do this research. At the same time, we're trying to encourage the field to pick up the baton and start doing this research. There is a massive amount of social psychologists and organizational behavior researchers who are very interested in topics of diversity and inclusion and equality at the workplace. And that has really led to the founding of the fields in which we understand how sexism operates, how racism operates. But when it comes to understanding underemployment in the context of military veterans, you don't see that work very often coming out of sort of the basic discipline. Instead, you see the sort of non-for-profits or very targeted organizations that are specifically in the veteran space, trying to do all the heavy lifting themselves, trying to make recommendations. And what I would like to see, or what I think the field needs, is to have basic researchers try to address these questions in the same way we've addressed other questions of discrimination or stereotyping or inequality, and publish issues related to veteran employment in our basic journals that these sort of organizations can then use to inform their policy initiatives. So one large paper, me and my colleagues, so my colleagues here, this is cross-discipline and cross-university, Stephen Shepard was a postdoc here at Fuqua and now is a professor of marketing at Oklahoma. David Sherman's a social psychologist at UCSB. Alaire McLean is a sociologist at Washington State University. And then there's me, I'm a psychologist and an organizational behavior researcher. And in this paper, we published in a very visible journal called Perspectives on Psychological Science, an attempt to ask the field to start using our modern and basic theories, contemporary theories and methodologies to try to understand how people perceive vets, how vets do in the workforce, why we're seeing this sort of underemployment trend. Now, in this paper, we basically made the argument that there are sort of 5 overlapping things that we're going to have to understand if you want to understand veteran employment, inequality, and so forth. Some of these have been well researched and documented within sort of the military psychology space. So things like trauma during service, issues of who selects into the military. Others of these, socialization in the military, discrimination, and what I'll call stereotype threat or self-stigma. These are issues that social psychologists like myself and my colleagues are really well positioned to study, but haven't really studied. And so in this paper, we try to make the case that here are all kinds of ways in which modern theories can help us understand this problem. And by studying veterans and their employment, we can actually inform these theories. So what socialization in the military means is, how does the experience of being in the military lead people to see the world a certain way, understand their social world a certain way that might make the transition to the civilian workforce a little more jarring? And what can organizations do to make that transition less, conflict less with their experience? What self-stigma and stereotype threat is how does a veteran's awareness or beliefs about how people see him or her affect their behavior? And we're starting to do research on that. The one topic on the bottom right here in sort of the peach-colored circle is discrimination, and that is, how do people understand and see and view and treat veterans differently that is leading to these outcomes? And so the research I want to share with you today basically is one paper that has gone in that direction, but we're trying to go in all these directions at once and also encourage the field through the research initiative at Fuqua to do this. So when it comes to discrimination, sorry, let me just catch up with my notes here. What I want to point to is that contemporary theories of how people stereotype others and think about others have shown that it's a lot more complex than just this person doesn't like those groups because of whatever, and so they don't employ them, or they don't hire them, or they don't like them, or they're mean to them, or whatever it is. The stereotyping process, what exactly goes into it and creates it, and what people are thinking about others is more complex and nuanced than that is. And in the case of veterans, it's interesting because public sentiment is very positive towards veterans, yet we know that they tend not to receive the same types of jobs. And so there is something complicated going in there that is leading to this sort of what is happening that's within the content of the veteran stereotype that's leading employers to say on one hand, we want to employ vets, but on the other hand, not really achieve the level of employment they want. Something is happening in there. And we try to use, in this paper, a very new theory of how people understand others, and then real experiments with random assignment to test these ideas to see, can we understand a little bit in a new and nuanced way how it is that people see vets and what consequences that has for their employment. So in this paper, we basically asked the question, how are veterans stereotyped simply by virtue of being a veteran? Meaning, assume you know 2 people, you know all the same things about them, but one extra piece of information about person A over person B is they're also a veteran. How does that change what you think about them? And what can our newest theories in the field tell us about how that stereotype might look? So I'm going to present to you a series of studies that tries to unpack that and tries to help us start to address it. Now, in thinking about this, what we relied on was a relatively new theory about how people understand the minds or the mental capacity of others. And what Shine and Gray have proposed is that people tend to understand others along 2 dimensions, or there are 2 dimensions at least which that can happen. We can see people and understand the degree to which they're good at agency-based things, so planning and acting and doing and taking control of the world and going right out there and getting stuff done. Or we can think about people in the domains in which they're good at feeling and having complex emotions and sensations, things like empathy, emotional intelligence, people might call it sometimes. Now, there's these two dimensions, the agency dimension, the feeling dimension. One interesting idea with this model is that they tend, when people think of someone, they tend to think of these things as negatively correlated, meaning the more they think someone is really good at agency, at planning and acting and doing, the less they tend to think they're going to be good at these other things like feeling, having emotions and complex sensations and thoughts and so forth. So there tend to be a hydraulic relationship between these two. In the context of veterans, we wanted to use this model because if it's true that people see those they think them to be high in agency, tend to see them as being lower in these sort of social emotional skills, it might be the case that veterans, because of the way or military members, the way they're advertised and portrayed in the media, may be seen as very, very high in agency. If that's the case, they might get this hit in this dimension of the feeling and emotions, the ability to let people think that they have these capacities. None of this is about what veterans actually can do, it's about what people think of others. Now, when you think of how veterans are portrayed, often what you see in pictures, and this is both in the way the military advertises itself in terms of recruitment and so forth, and the way that the media tends to just portray veterans. There's images on the top in which people are doing things, they're at the ready, they're acting and coordinating, tends to be much more common than the two images we see in the bottom. On the bottom, we see emotion and we see sort of, experience and care for others. On the top, what we're seeing is just action. And what we reasoned is that it's possible that people, when they think of veteran, might automatically think of this tendency to do things, to act, and this might have an impact on the degree to which they think that they can feel and have complex emotions and so forth. So what we do is we test this in all kinds of ways. Generally, in the studies that I run, we use random assignment in which we have people learn about someone, a target person, in this case, Todd Billingsley. We tell them it's a 32-year-old man, they work as a customer service representative, we give them some other information about them, and then we randomly assign our participants to one or two conditions. They either also learn this person served in the military, in this case it was as a Marine, and happens to be a combat veteran. In the other case, they don't learn that. Across our different experiments, the military experience tends to vary, but we always basically have people learn about either a person, and they're matched on all these dimensions, except for the added piece that they're also a military veteran. And after that, we measure what they think about that person. People don't know they're between condition effects here, but then we measure some sort of downstream consequences of learning that. In this first experiment I'm telling you about, what we measured is the degree to which people think that person has different traits and skills. And here are the data. And what I want to show you is that just adding the veteran piece makes people think that this person, Todd Billingsley, has more agency, can do things, can self-regulate, can get stuff done, right? So on the left side of this graph, you're seeing a boost for the veteran. But if you look at their ability to feel and have sensations and emotions, people think the veteran has a lower ability for those things. So in that middle bar there, you're seeing that the punishments or the veteran's getting just from the stereotype or just from adding that information. And they also think that veteran is more mechanical and robotic of a person than the non-veteran. So just adding that piece of information is changing how we think of that person's skills and traits. Now, the question becomes, if learning that someone is a veteran, was in the military, is actually causing people to see them as better at agency, but worse at feeling, and sort of in a way more like a robot would be, what implication is that having for employment? So after this study, we look at how is this going to impact people's transition into the workforce. Now, an important thing to remember here is the workforce is moving in a direction in which employers, no matter what kind of jobs they're looking for, they tend to want people to have these emotional skills, to be able to do things that robots and computers can't do, basically. And so lots of people are writing about how this notion of people thinking that people are high in emotional IQ is going to drive hiring, is going to drive the new industry, is going to drive the economy. And so veterans are seen as really good at doing things, not that good at experiencing things and having this emotional side. Might there be an impact on how, what people think vets are suited for when it comes to hiring them? And then when they're looking at resumes, they're just learning this person has all these skills, but is also a vet or not. So another study we ran, we just asked people to rate how well suited they think veterans are to a series of different careers. And these careers were just, people just looked at a random set of careers, but we bucketed these careers by the degree to which they're jobs that require agency over feeling or feeling over agency. So the agency over feeling jobs, which are in these realistic and conventional categories. Realistic jobs are things like fireman and carpenter and mechanic. It's doing real things. Conventional tends to be things in which you're more sort of at an office, but you're doing rote orderly things all the time. Secretary, accountant, these kinds of things. Social jobs are kinds of jobs that are just dealing with other people, like you would imagine, where it requires understanding what the other person is thinking. And artistic doesn't mean doing the arts, but it means creative types jobs. And what you can see here is that people think that vets are most suited for realistic and conventional jobs and are less suited for social and least suited for artistic. This is just correlational, but it's starting to show a relation between this kind of stereotype and what kind of jobs people think vets are more suited for and therefore less suited for. Next, what I want to show you is an actual study where we had HR managers and supervisors, people who are actually doing hiring. We gave them applicants' cover letters, and we asked them the degree to which they think they could work in different jobs. And in these cover letters, we added either that this person was in the Marine Corps, or in our control condition, we want the person to still be sort of selfless. We added that this person worked overseas with United Planet, so that we could give them the same type of work experience and match it across the CV, but one was in the military, one was working for a non-governmental organization. And then we asked these HR managers and supervisors the degree to which they thought these people would fit in different types of jobs. And so what you can see here, if you look on the right side of this figure, you'll see the non-veteran and the veteran, whether that was in the, people were in the condition where they learned about this person was a veteran or not, but had all the same skills basically. For non-social careers, they see the vet and the non-vet as equally good of a fit for this career. But if you look on the left side, where you have the social careers, where the careers where you're dealing with other people and success requires understanding other people, these HR managers are assuming the veteran's going to be a worse fit for that job. So what we're seeing is people aren't just blanket saying vets are bad at things or vets are great at things, but there's a specific relationship between the type of stereotype that tends to be out there and the kinds of careers they're seeing them as fitting and therefore not fitting. Another experiment we ran, which basically replicated this, here we partnered with a large restaurant chain, and they let us send applications out to their hirers, the people who do the hiring at the restaurant, their supervisors, and we basically showed them the same resume. People had some experience with Excel, etc., and they want to work at the restaurant. And we just added also that this person was either a veteran or there was no veteran information on the resume. And then these hirers just told us how good of a fit they would be for the different jobs at the restaurant. If you look at the effects of adding veteran to the resume, what you're seeing is really fascinating. If you look at, on the left here, we have suitability, and this is, can they do a good job of it? Can they excel at it? Would they enjoy it? Of dishwasher or prep cook, these are things in the back of the house that aren't dealing with people. There's an assumption here that veterans are going to be much better than non-veterans at those kinds of jobs. We look at the right side of the figure and we have server here. Now what we're seeing is that people think, and a server is in the front of the house dealing with people, etc. People are now thinking veterans are worse at that job and non-veterans are better. We get the same results if we look at host, the person who seats and greets people to the restaurant. So again, we're not seeing an overall tendency to think veterans are worse. We're seeing the stereotype, which is about veterans, how their mind works and what they're good at, is leading people to think they should have these kinds of jobs and not these other kinds of jobs. But these other kinds of jobs are very important jobs that make up a large proportion of the economy. The last study I want to tell you about is us attempting to use this model to try to eliminate this effect. We thought, what can we do? What can a vet do that will help them overcome this effect? If you follow the veteran literature, the veteran employment movement, you'll see a lot of people doing things like skill translators to help people vets explain their skills or how they're relevant, how the military experience is relevant to the real world. But we were trying to think, if it really is the problem that people are seeing them as so high in agency that they don't think they have this other side to their personality, what if a vet does something in their experience or in their resume that signals that side, will it eliminate this tendency to funnel them towards one type of job at the expense of the other? So in this study, people saw one of 4 resumes for an applicant named Peter, and we manipulated 2 things and randomly assigned people to condition. One thing was whether Peter was a veteran or not, and that was only briefly mentioned in the resume. So some saw Peter as a veteran, some didn't learn Peter was a veteran. And then we also added whether Peter had some volunteer experience in animal rescue, caring for animals, or we didn't put that in. Okay, so people are learning they're a vet or not, and that maybe they had some time volunteering to care for animals, which takes sort of it's sort of a soft side skill example. All resumes also included experience as a data clerk and hardware sales and all this kind of stuff. And then we asked people, okay, Peter wants to work in an event planning organization. To what extent would you ask Peter to do the following based on their resume? And there were things that were very just logistic, ordering chairs, coming up with all kinds of things based on pieces of data, or things that required understanding people, choosing music based on a client's desired atmosphere, dealing with a crying bride, choosing a venue to suit the style and vision of the client. So you've got to understand and get in the mind of the client. So what we see here, I'm just showing you the data for these high feeling tasks. If you look on the left side here, we show that at baseline, when we don't mention anything about the animal rescue, people are showing that same effect where they think the non-veteran is going to be better at this high feeling task than the veteran, the green line. But if you look at the right side of this figure, now we're seeing when we mentioned that this person also volunteered at the pet shelter to help, to play with and help animals, now all of a sudden the veteran and the non-veteran are seen as equally suitable. So this one intervention we put in there to address the specific way we thought the stereotype was operating is having a big effect on people's understanding or beliefs about what this person can or cannot do. Okay, so that's just one example of how we're trying to go this new direction by trying to get basic ideas and science to inform why there's problems of veteran underemployment. We're doing this in all kind of other dimensions. What I want to get at here is that if these problems are partly psychological, meaning people have stereotypes towards veterans that are clouding what they see, this is a hard nut to crack, just like it is with race and with gender. It's difficult, and it's not going to be solved by military veterans just explaining their experience better, right? People are going to use this interpretive lens to think about what they think this person is good at when it comes to the subjective intangibles about why we hire someone. Where are they likable? Where are their skills? How do they think? What's their culture fit going to be like? And so how do we address this? Things like implicit bias training aren't that effective. It's also really tricky to deal with because it feels to the people doing this like they're being helpful. They're funneling someone towards something good. They don't realize that they're actually doing this based on an assumption. And by funneling someone towards these sort of agentic types of careers, they're funneling them away from things that they might otherwise want to do or could make a lot of money doing. And it's based purely on assumptions. So it calls to the importance of the public seeing veterans realistically, heterogeneous, deep people who are all different from one another, just like the civilian population is. How do we change that stereotype? We have to think hard about the role of the media, which we don't have that much control over, but also well-meaning people within the military and within organizations that are trying to promote the military. We have to think hard about how we frame veterans when people are trying to recruit them. Our language choices surrounding certain organizations like Wounded Warriors and Hiring Our Heroes. These are great organizations, they're doing great things, but by constantly labeling veterans in a very specific way, it might serve to keep reinforcing the stereotype. And we might want to think about different language we use when we're talking about this group of people. And in fact, we're running studies right now that are looking at how this language, even though it looks positive, is more and more reaffirming this sort of agency rather than feeling stereotype. So I'm going to stop here. I want to quickly say thank you to two groups that have been funding this research and the VTRI. And we're always looking for more funding, but we've got great support from Microsoft Military Affairs and the Amazon Scholars and Academic Relations Group. And if you want to contact me, there's my email address. Otherwise, we only have a little bit of time left because I said lots. We got 5 minutes. I'm happy to take any questions. So I will stop sharing my screen now. Sorry. No, I think I did stop sharing it. And I see some questions on the right. So give me 2 seconds to look at them and think. Okay. So Brandon, a current MBA student, asks, hi, Brandon, does your research indicate any changes from a veteran? I see. You know, a lot of military people ask me the question, there's big differences between Marines versus Army, or here it's Reservist National Guard from a veteran. And people within that world understand there are huge differences in their experiences and you know, maybe their cultures and so forth and what kind of experience they would have had. But to the lay perceiver, they don't really note those differences. Now, we haven't looked at a Reservist National Guard compared to a vet, and that might be a little different actually, I'm not sure. But across our study, sometimes the person's a Marine, sometimes they're in the Army. We sort of move that around, and it doesn't seem to be the case. There just happens to be a military stereotype for the general public that would be different if you were talking to very informed people who have been in the military, but that tends to be the case. Sean asks, or says, in many ways, military units are similar to athletic teams, disciplined, team-based, mission-oriented, resilient. Yet I get the sense that employers view former athletes more favorably of an organizational fit than military veterans. That's a really good question. And so they don't get penalized in the same way as athletes. I think why that is because the military is a rare thing that's seen as entirely all-encompassing, changes who you are. I'm not saying that's the case necessarily, but people see it that way. Once you're a vet forever, and the military has informed you in a way very few social experiences make people think someone is a different person now. Whereas being on a certain team, people see it as just part of the many experiences they've had in life. Whereas the military seems almost like it tells someone deeply who they are. And so it just has this bigger effect. Now, any group that has a strong stereotype, people are going to absolutely, I bet you, if you did the research, you could find that people are putting athletes towards some type of job as opposed to others. But I don't think people think that their athletic experience changes how their mind works to the degree that people think that when it comes to the military. Ryan asks, has any consideration been given to the type of person drawn to join the military? It could be that agency personality traits are more present in someone prone to joining. Absolutely, Ryan. There's a big field on trying to understand if certain types of people are more likely to join the military than others. Now, remember that I'm not actually saying that military members are more agentic. I'm saying that's the stereotype people hold. It also is possible that people might join the military because they want to do stuff. One interesting thing that research shows is that if you look at the reasons people join the military, the things you might think of, like serving your country, is not the only reason. They're not necessarily even the top reasons. A lot of people join the military because they want to learn experiences, or say they want to learn skills, or they have nothing else to do. There's all kinds of reasons people join, and it's quite heterogeneous. There are some, there are a lot of studies on does social economic status drive if you join or not. There are studies on does race join and gender, and there's no overwhelmingly clear difference that we've seen so far. It doesn't mean that there isn't absolutely self-selection effects, meaning a certain type of person is either more willing to join the military, or put another way, there's some types of people that would never join the military, so they're not in that pile. But that doesn't mean that can't be true, and at the same time, employers don't also hold these stereotypes Okay, so thank you so much for listening. Again, feel free to reach out if you'd like to. And we're out of time. I believe there'll be another one of these very soon, so check the website. And all the best to everyone. Thank you very much.